Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome everybody to our Sky AI League competition workshop, preparing your product for success. So today we're going to walk you through a couple of distinct pieces of content that will help you figure out how you should be presenting your technology for the final stages of the competition, and different considerations you have to take with regards to the audience that you're putting your product in front of. So if we can get started on the slide deck. So we're going to take this through three phases. The first phase is defining what a good sports technology investment is. This is important for you to distinguish between what you're presenting and how those you are presenting will perceive your presentation. So essentially, what is your audience thinking about when they're looking at your product? The second piece is ensuring a USP. USP stands for unique selling proposition. So is your product truly unique, and how do you manage that? And the third piece is around how to pitch an investment idea. So you're getting to the point where you've learned about your audience, you've made sure that your product is unique. Now, how do you deliver that? How do you get that across to your audience? So those are the three phases we'll be walking through today. So what makes a good sports technology investment? So there are multiple aspects of what makes a good sports technology investment. We've managed to distill it down to 8 for you. But really the key focuses are making sure you have a unique product, making sure you have proofs of concept or case studies, a clear roadmap, so making sure that there's a future for your product, making sure that it's a healthy and growing investment from a financial perspective, having a good management team, having good backing, so who in the ecosystem is supporting you, a great user experience, whether it's B2B or direct to consumer, and a solid tool set to help you power and build your technology. So taking those one by one. When it comes to a unique product, it's important to understand that every investor market who's specializing in sports technology has a view of the market already. So it's important to make sure that, one, you do your research, and two, you ensure that whatever is existing in that investor's portfolio, that they don't have something similar that exists there already. It's also to make sure that you put yourself in the best position for a competitive advantage. So in market, you're seen as someone who's unique, not a copycat, or not someone who's trying to solve for a problem that's already been solved. So really developing a unique product is extremely important for you as an innovator, as a business leader, and also within the competition, to contextualize it, making sure that you stand out amongst your competition. The second piece is proof of concepts or case studies. So a lot of the time, depending on what level of investor you're speaking to, you'll have pre-seed investors all the way to Series C, D, growth, and then beyond that, if you will. And so in the context of this competition, we're looking around pre-seed or seed, depending on, inshallah, when a few of you win this competition, you'll be looking for that level of investment. But the best thing you can do as a technology is provide case studies, use case opportunities where you've established partnerships and you've been able to test it in live environments or with key audiences or what have you. But the best way to show that your technology works is to actually show it in action. So this is really important. And obviously, as a part of this competition, we've put you guys in a situation where you can start to build that code and start to create a proof case, if you will. So that's a great start, but we encourage you to think beyond that. If you were to take on a proof of concept or to build one of your first case studies, what would that look like? Whether it's for the World Cup or AFC or a local tennis tournament, or it's something at the local golf, local golf green, whatever that means, as long as you can put it in action and prove that it's working, that you'll be more successful for it. The third piece, a clear roadmap. So this is one of the things I see a lot of sports technology startups and even growth companies failing at, is not having a detailed, very, very clear roadmap, not just on developing new features or developing new capability, but a roadmap for maintaining your product and the quality that you're providing to customers, whether that's now or in the future, right? So it's having a very distinctive roadmap, both from a business perspective and from a technological perspective, are extremely important. In my opinion, as an investor, that's probably, I would say, one, if not the top, the second most important piece of investing in sports technology. So it's very important that you keep that in consideration. The fourth piece is having a healthy and growing business. So again, bearing in mind that a lot of you, this is not you're not far down the path where you have clients and everything. It's very much an initial distinctive first attempt at solving problems for the sports industry. But in general, at the very least, showcasing that you have a plan for maintaining good financial health and good technological health, and that you're going to be keeping that on an upward trend, that's really, really, really important. I would say if clear roadmap is number two, a healthy and growing product and business is number one for any sports technology investor. On to the fifth, the management team. So if you are the founder, if you are the innovator, if you're co-founders, what have you, it's extremely important to understand who you're working with, how they contribute to your business, and how your roles and responsibilities will develop as the product and the business that you're building develops over time. So from a management team perspective, we as investors really look for a balanced management team. If someone's really, really big into business development and sales, then someone else in the management team has to be able to really have a good, solid financial background that will help, and together they will help each other drive as much productivity as possible while still maintaining all of the required leadership skills for growing the business and growing your teams. The next point is having a good backing. And when we say a good backing, we mean it doesn't necessarily mean you have to have existing investors that are world class. It could be your mom, your aunt, your uncle, your cousins, all of them contributing, as long as you have a solid community that is supportive of your vision and is able to help you grow your business and grow your product in as efficient way as possible. Now, if you have other venture capitalists or private equity firms or whomever who are supporting, that obviously helps a lot more. So look into wider opportunities in the ecosystem from an investment perspective, where you can get world-class backing on board. And networking in that sense is extremely important to help you develop relationships and eventually in the future get more robust backing as you go along. The next point is user experience. At the end of the day, this will make or break whether or not you have a good product, for three reasons. Feedback loops. So if you have a client and you're not taking on their recommendations, especially in the early phases, and you're not being considerate of what the clients need, your product will fail before you even start. So the user experience is extremely important. And I'm not talking about customer success. Customer success is different, where that's more of the account management piece. And when we're talking explicitly about your product, how does a person or the user on the front end operate with your technology? Whether it's a fan sitting on their couch watching the broadcast, or if it's a B2B client, say like FIFA, for example, and they're using your technology to help with scoring or athlete management or event management, what have you. The user experience is the most important thing, and feedback loops will make or break your product regardless. So it's really important to keep an open mind when it comes to user experience, being flexible in the beginning, and then over time, you'll develop the expertise and the understanding of how to balance dealing with your clients, but at the same time, how to balance your authenticity and the vision that you and your investors or whomever else is participating in your product, and make sure that you're able to manage between the two. The last piece is this tool set. Obviously, this is very important for the conversation we're having around the competition. The better your tool set, in an ideal world, the cheaper your costs, because the ability to leverage the tool set is more important than having 1,000 tools. And this is where AI, especially in this instance, can come into play. And so we really, really encourage you to think of ways to use AI, not just to fuel the product, but to fuel your development of the product and the processes behind the product as well. So that's what we take into consideration when we're looking at sports investments as a whole. Again, this is very high level, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer those on Discord or in the chat. But that's the general principle of what makes a good sports technology investment. In addition to that, what are we as investors really, really looking for? We've whittled these down to 5 key criteria, essentially. Problem solving, strategic fit, portfolio fit, risks and mitigations, and investment type. So not just what makes a good sports technology investment, but as an investor, when I'm looking at investments, what am I looking for this company, not just the product, but the people, the product, the platform? What am I looking for it to do for me as an investor? So one, I needed to problem solve. I needed to be a business that is actively responding to a problem in market and has a specific market with a large enough target audience that we can see that it has an opportunity to grow and an opportunity to build a roadmap to solve further problems down the road, or to truly, truly flesh out that original problem that they were addressing in the first place. So your product should be solving for a real problem in market. And when I say a real problem, not an annoyance, or if a client comes to you and says, this kind of annoys me, I don't have time to deal with it. You're not solving for a problem, you're solving for an annoyance. And so it's really important to distinguish between the two. Solving for a problem means that it's not just a single user or single client that has this problem, but en masse, every sports rights holder or every sports broadcaster, whomever your target audience is, that same problem comes up across every stakeholder. And that, again, requires a lot of research. But at the end of the day, if you're solving for a problem, you're more likely to succeed. And the bigger the audience you have to solve that problem for, the better. The second thing from a strategic fit is knowing who you're looking or asking for investment for. So if it's from Surge or Sky or whomever, you really have to understand who they are and what is the strategy behind them wanting to invest, not just in your company or product itself, but in the ecosystem as a whole. How are they fulfilling their strategy by having you be a part of their portfolio and their ecosystem? And so what's really important there is understanding who you're talking to, making sure you're complementing their vision. For example, we at Surge, we are a sports consumer focused fund delivering both financial and social returns. So if you were to pitch to Surge, for example, we would make sure that you're fulfilling the idea of addressing sports consumers, or benefiting the value chain that ultimately ends with the sports consumer, that you're contributing to social returns, whether that's to the sports ecosystem, to the kingdom's ecosystem, what have you, and then also for financial returns. So again, like I said earlier, healthy and growing business, good roadmap, etc. So a strong strategic fit for us means that you're more likely to succeed over anyone else who comes across our lab. Third is portfolio fit. Now, portfolio fit is a little, you might say, isn't that the same as strategic fit? But portfolio fit means looking at who else is in the portfolio and how could you potentially interoperate with those other investments, whether that's sports IP investment, other technology companies. If you have an investor who does multi-industry investments, where could you see your technology or your business potentially crossing over with them? So it's really important to understand the investor's portfolio, who they have in it, if they're willing to diversify their portfolio or not. So are you going to be unique in their portfolio, and is that something they actually want, or do they want you to fit into a larger value chain across the board? And also, are these companies within the portfolio people or products you feel like you can collaborate with? So that's extremely important as well. The fourth thing is risks and mitigations. At the end of the day, if you're asking an investor to put capital or money in towards your business, they have to understand the risks and how they're going to mitigate those risks, so solve for those risks. And the more you can help them identify the risks and, again, back to problem solving, help them understand how they can mitigate against those risks, then you're already giving yourself an advantage. So and there's risks across multiple different things, especially in sports technology, costs for hosting, penetration testing, things like that, making sure that your product will stand up under a lot of load or a lot of users or poor bandwidth, what have you. There's a lot of risks and things you can do to mitigate. So it's really important to be upfront and honest about these things, because if an investor sees that you're solving for these problems or willing to solve for these problems at the very least, then you're putting yourself in a position for success. The last piece is the investment type. So understanding when you're coming to an investor, now this is not as relevant to the competition, but when you're coming to an investor, how much of your product or your business are you willing to part with? And when I say part with, that doesn't necessarily mean sell off. It can mean partner. It can mean venture and have equal risk and equal stake in whatever you're building. But it's important to understand that if you are going to bring on partners, and if that's something you're going to propose in your final competition presentation, then it's just something to consider, because that will be something that we as investors will look for. Who are you partnering with? Why are you partnering with them? And what benefit will that bring to both of you? And what, again, back to the risks and mitigations, what are the risks partnering with whom you're partnering with, and how to deal with that. So moving on, obviously we know that that the sports technology industry is very, very vast. Now, given that there are a lot of different opportunities in the sports market, especially the sports technology market, to address, the competition we have currently has 4 core segments. So what I've done here is I've highlighted in dark green and in light green the different points with which within the ecosystem with which your products should or could interact with. So in the top, you'll see the dark green is really focused on what this competition is asking for. And the light green is no matter what you engage with on the dark green portion, at some point, your products should be touching upon the light green pieces of this ecosystem. So I'm not going to necessarily allow to you. We will share this later. However, However, it is important for you to recognize that you don't have to build a product that addresses all of this at once. That's actually the opposite of what we would recommend that you do. Because at the end of the day, if you build a product that answers a specific question, then hopefully the outputs of solving that problem will at some point touch all of these pieces. And then as you grow your product and your business, then you can think about expanding the features to address different use cases and touch on different points in the ecosystem. But our recommendation when you're getting started is stay focused. Don't try to do too much. If your one product and one feature set can solve for multiple things, that's even better. That makes it a more encouraging product. But don't try to over featureize whatever you're building, because that's ultimately going to set you up for failure, because from a cost perspective, from a resourcing perspective, it'll be much harder for you to maintain, let alone grow. So the big question here is, who are you solving for? Understanding your audience and where you're targeting your product explicitly is really important. So here we have an example of a very, very high level example of the ecosystem and the different tiers that we see from participation to consumption. So if you're, creating a ball tracking technology for elite competition, then you're probably going to only focus on the top tier. If you're doing something like a registration platform for grassroots initiatives, then you're probably going to focus on the third tier, which is more around casual participation and potentially even in the mid-tier, depending on who you're targeting. But the important thing is to be clear on who you're targeting. Within this quadrant, who is your key target audience and who is your secondary audience? Focus on the key target audiences and make considerations for the second target audience as a part of your roadmap. So really the idea is also to stay focused, similar to what we said on the feature set, but making sure that as you're focusing on your feature set, you're also focusing on who the users of that feature set are going to be. And then consider how you can use your technology to integrate between the different tiers of the ecosystem. If you're starting off, for example, like I said, with a registration platform for casual, so something like a app for booking a paddle court, for example, how in your roadmap can you interoperate that with, for example, tier 1 facilities? So giving amateur paddle players the opportunity to play in tier 1 paddle courts, for example. How can you bridge the gap and maintain some kind of interconnectivity between the different parts of the ecosystem, such that there's a pathway for people to develop or engage with not just your product, but your partners and your clients as well. And then consider the effect of who you're solving for, who that ultimate audience or user is. What does selecting this audience mean for your product now? What does it mean for your roadmap? What does it mean when it comes to your resources and skill sets within your team and how you need to grow that team? What does that mean for your clients? So are you going to start with a certain number of clients in a certain niche and then grow your number of clients within that niche, or expand your niches but try to keep your client base small? So it's a lot to consider when you're thinking of an audience to solve for. And then also, when you're thinking of an audience to solve for, it's really important that you consider how this will affect your business plan. How will this affect your finances? How will this affect your timelines on delivery for not just future clients, but existing clients as well? I would say the worst thing you can do when developing a product is be myopic and only focus on a single client and solving for them, rather than ensuring that your product can be productized and used by multiple clients as you're getting started right off the bat. I've seen way too many sports technology companies just focus on developing for one client explicitly and continue down that path. And then as soon as they get interest from another client, they basically need to pull back all of the development and bespoke work that they did for that first client in order to redevelop for this new client. And then eventually you have so many different development streams that you've established tech debt without having a core underlying functionality for your technology that you can white label and then build on top of for each client. So productizing is extremely important, especially when you're considering who you're solving for and ensuring that once you get good POCs and good clients on your first feature set, giving you the flexibility and the ability to adapt that beyond what you've built at your core. So as you can imagine, all of these points come together. Creating a unique selling point was the second piece on our agenda. So what does it mean to have a unique selling point? We talked about this a little bit about having a unique product, but when it comes to a unique selling point, this is what your clients will be looking for. So make sure you do your research on who's in market. The worst thing you can do is pitch to someone, whether it's an investor, whether it's the competition judges, whether it's a potential client. The worst thing you can do is pitch exactly the same thing that the guy before you just pitched or the guy after you is going to pitch. Sorry, guys and girls. So the idea is that if you ensure that you've done your research and that at the very least, even if it's a similar proposition to the person before you or the person after you, as long as you have something that distinguishes you from them, that is truly of value to your audience, then you'll be in a good position. Because right now the market is so saturated with so many ideas and so many ideas. So I'll give context. Today I heard a pitch from a company that was doing robotic camera tracking mobile units for paddle. The day before, I got a pitch from someone else who's doing the exact same thing. And I asked them, do you know who your competition is in the space? One of them said no. One of them said yes. The one who said yes didn't even mention the other one. So for me, it was just a very aha kind of moment, understanding that they didn't do their research. They're not aware of their market. They're not aware of how they can penetrate their market, but they're also not aware of how unique or not unique their product is. And as an investor, that's a red flag because there's always going to be competition in market. So there's nothing to guarantee that either one of these companies are necessarily going to be a good investment for the future because there's no clear differentiation between the two. And sometimes from an investor perspective, we look at them and we say, you know what, you should meet these guys and maybe consider consolidating because you're both solving for the same problems. You both have similar price points and your products aren't too far from each other from a technical perspective or from a use case perspective. So you might as well consolidate or at the very least be aware of each other. And if you're going to compete, have something unique on either end to compete with. So that kind of seeps into the clear differentiation, making sure that from a feature set and from a capability set, your product stands out, but also from a marketing perspective. And this is really, really important because in the beginning, how you sell yourself will make or break your product. If you're coming in and saying, oh, we do A, B, C, D, and E, and the guy before you can do A, B, C, D, but not E, you have to focus on that E and say, okay, we're fully aware that these people do all of these features and we can offer the same, which is actually great because we can offer it to you at a different pricing or at a different rate or at a different latency, depending on the product. And we have our unique selling proposition of E that is an added advantage to what you'd be getting in market from anyone else. So being very clear on how you're different is more important than how you're the same. A user-centered design, so we touched on this earlier with user experience. And the idea is that, think of it this way. We have so many apps on our phones today, and we get very frustrated with them if within 3 clicks, you're not getting what you need from the app. Think of it in a similar way when it comes to your product. If you've got a coach trying to use your product because your AI tracking mechanism is pulling together stats, and if he can't get to the statistic that he or she needs within 3 clicks, your product is dead. Unless it's an extremely overcomplicated thing that requires hand-holding or a service alongside use of the product. So if you were saying, here's our product, we'll also have someone to utilize it on your behalf, which is not ideal because that's additional cost for the client and additional headcount for you as a business. Keep it simple. There's a principle called the KISS principle, which is called keep it stupid simple. When it comes to user-centric designs, keep it stupid simple. Keep it as easy as possible for people to get to where they need to get to within your product in order to ensure your product success. Like I said earlier, how people use it and people's first impressions of your project will make or break your future. And speaking of the future, future-proof. So obviously with this competition and everything we're doing with AI and using that as a tool set to develop the technology, that's extremely important. But you have to understand that it's not just about using AI to develop a product that addresses the needs for today. It's about addressing the needs for your clients in a year, 3 years, 5 years, or by the time, if we're talking in Saudi terms, the World Cup in 2034. How do you ensure that what you're building now is future-proofed such that you can build upon it with any new developments or any new trends that come online in the next 5-10 years, that your product is able to very easily either integrate or develop into a product that can utilize or address the key needs and wants of the market at the time. So again, coming back to productizing, that's an extremely point of consideration as well when you're thinking of future-proofing and addressing everything in the future. Another point is scalability. So when it comes to your product, you want to ensure that, again, back to my earlier point, you're not just solving for a single client. You're solving for a problem in industry, for a specific market, right? And the ability to scale from a single client to multiple clients, or a single niche or problem that you're addressing to multiple problems or niches that you're addressing is extremely important, because that's going to guarantee, again, back to the point around being a healthy and growing business and product, being able to scale is going to guarantee you success in that factor. And that's what, again, investors are looking for and what makes a good investment. So when you're thinking about your product, saying, okay, this is great, it's going to solve for this problem, but how are we going to scale that? How are we going to get this from 1 client to 100 clients? How are we going to get this from solving 1 problem to 100 problems in the future? That's not to say you have to solve for the 100 problems in the next 1-2 years, but your product has to be robust and flexible enough that you can scale it, or you're confident that you will be able to scale it over the next few years in order to grow your client base or to advance or innovate on your product. The last one is real world applications. So it's fantastic to think of a new idea that's super, super innovative. But if no one's going to use it, then that's a problem. I'll give you an example. A lot of people talk about wearables and VR glasses and headsets and whatnot. And these are all incredible, incredible, incredible innovations. However, how many people can afford a headset? Right? How many people can actually spend the time to put on a headset to engage with their sport? Most of the time, nowadays, people barely have 5 minutes to look through notifications. If you think from a content perspective, people usually decide within 1.5 seconds whether or not they want to continue viewing that content or not, let alone taking a headset or other wearables and taking a good chunk out of their day in order to put them on, or be able to take a chunk out of their day to earn enough money to be able to afford one of these things. So know who your ultimate consumer audience is, if that's your audience, or if you're working on a B2B product, making sure that it's not something that will necessarily be too alien from their existing environment. If you give a new coach a new tool, you need to ensure that they will be capable of activating that new tool and able to use it, or be able to fit it in their existing training regimen that they currently have with their team, instead of giving them a tool that they'll say, yeah, this is great, but I don't have time to use it, or I don't have anyone on my team who has the skill set to use it. So just really make sure that you have real world applications for whatever product that you're going to build, so you're not just building a product for innovation's sake. And then the last point I'll make on this before moving on from a unique selling point perspective is make sure you really define what your ambition is, and analyze where and how your ambition will play, not just within the Saudi ecosystem, but within the global sports ecosystem as well. So when you're preparing your final presentation, really, really make sure that your vision and your goals for your product fit within the ecosystem that you're trying to implement it into, whether that's at the client level or at the ecosystem level or at the sporting level, does not matter. But just bear in mind that that's something that we will be looking for as a criteria. So I have a couple case studies for you guys. I've only picked 2 of the categories, given we're limited on time. But the first one I wanted to show you guys was a game strategy case study. There's a company in market called Second Spectrum. They're owned by Genius Sports, and they're a very, very well-known analytics company that uses AI for advanced performance analysis, enhancing team tactics, and even creating visualizations for broadcasts based on the data that they've collected. They're very, very well recognized for their AI-driven insights, and they're trusted by sports leagues on a global level. They compete with my former company, Hawkeye Innovations, on a lot of things, and they're considered, I would say, top 3 in the market for AI based tracking technologies. They were acquired by Genius Sports in 2021 for quite a significant amount because Genius Sports understood the vision and what it meant to have a data-driven company and products within their ecosystem to service the sports ecosystem. So how do they use AI? Very high level, of course, but player tracking and analysis. So they use AI algorithms to track all the movement on the field or court or whatever playing ground within that sport is available to them, and they match those to patterns of athlete behavior, team tactics. They use this for injury prevention and understanding what it means on a athlete per athlete basis. And there's multiple applications of the data. Hopefully you've done your homework and understand what that means from an AI and tracking perspective. But at the end of the day, player tracking right now is fueling so much of the sports tech industry and the rights holders. And when I mean rights holders, I mean people who own specific sporting entities. Like the Premier League is a rights holder because they own all the rights to the Premier League, etc. So that's one, player tracking and analysis. It's very impressive on there, and it's all AI powered. tactical strategy. So again, they take the same data that they're collecting and use that to dissect the footage that they've captured, and use that to advise coaching staff, to advise broadcasters, commentators, etc. And the last thing they do is, again, performance insights. So coaches and analysts use this AI to help assess strategies and understand weaknesses. And all of this is very much data-driven, both live and in non-live events. So what does that mean? What has Second Spectrum been able to do? One, they've been able to enhance team performance across the board within the industry. And they've also been able to make advancements in broadcast innovations, things like overlays over broadcasts, or again, tactical analysis for commentators. They really do use AI to generate insights and assist with content and decision making, making them very valuable in market. Now, that's not to say that there aren't like a Second Spectrum in market, but they are one of the key companies in market that are doing it the best and are the most well recognized. Here, I've just got a quick video as an example. I'm not sure if it's going to work or not. Let me see if that... give me 1 second to understand if I can actually do it this way. If I can't share the video in the next 30 seconds, we'll move on, but we'll share the presentation so that you can take a look at it. It doesn't look like it, but I will share this around later, and then we will get it to you later. Great. So moving on. Another case study that we have is a broadcast and media case study. So Beyond Sports was a company that is part of the Sony Sports Group. They were acquired in 2020 to sit alongside Hawkeye Innovations, so one of the competitors to Second Spectrum, and Pulse Live. Pulse Live build the websites, apps, fantasy for the Premier League, MotoGP, Formula E, World Rugby, etc. And so when they invested in Beyond Sports, they were looking for a company that filled the rest of the value chain. So where Hawkeye did AI-based player tracking and event tracking for sporting events, Pulse Live did the digital engagement. They were looking for a third entity to fit within the Sony Sports Group to really use the data and the digital capabilities to address the next generation of fans. So it's a very, very interesting company. You should look into what their founder, Sander Shelton, says about he talks a lot about innovating in the for the next generation, which is very interesting. So they're an Emmy award-winning company. They essentially what they do is they take data, they validate the data, and then they manipulate the data in real time into visualizations that can be used for multiple purposes. But in this use case, we're talking about broadcast and content. And so with this real-time ability to manipulate the data into something that's engaging for fans, they've created a new revenue stream, and they've created a new way of engaging the next generation, which is what everybody's trying to solve for right now. How do we maintain our audience, our existing audience, but also engaging a new audience who engages in new ways? And so one of the things they've done brilliantly is engaging the next generation on platforms they already exist on, like Roblox, for example, or on Disney Plus, or on other various gaming or streaming platforms. One of the very, very cool things they've done is what they've dubbed as fun day football with the NFL. So they take live tracking from the NFL and they put it in an animated virtual experience. So think of it this way: if you have a parent watching the NFL game in real life, their kid could be watching that same game, but in their own character universe, their Peppa Pig universe, Toy Story universe, Simpsons universe, what have you, at the same exact time. So it's an excellent case study on how to use AI for engaging fans in both old and new, and in a very new and innovative way, and how to make engagement sticky. The next step beyond this, which they started to undertake, was how to get people to actively participate in the broadcast. And that's why the FIFA World Cup on Roblox, FIFA World on Roblox, was such a success for them, because people would watch the match in Roblox characters within FIFA World on Roblox as their own characters. They could run around within the action, but they would be able to clip, for example, the goal against Argentina by Saudi. They would be able to clip that and reproduce it from their perspective and how they're interacting with it in Roblox, and be able to share that with their friends. So again, making it less of a sit back passive experience, but more of an active participatory experience for the fans. And that truly is where the future of fan engagement is going to be, in those sit forward, active participation experiences. So it's a great case study. I also had a video on the Toy Story piece, but it's not going to work, so we'll share it around later. So another point we really wanted to make, and I'll try to get through these next points a little bit more quickly, the importance of people. We've already iterated this, so I won't sit on it too long, but having strong leadership. And strong doesn't necessarily mean a loud person or someone who's forceful, but someone who knows their product, knows the industry, is passionate about the vision, and has, at the very least, surrounded themselves with a management team that has strengths where the founder's weaknesses sits. Now, sometimes there's a founding team or a group of people who are building a product. The idea here is that make sure that each of you plays to your strengths, and that all of these strengths, when combined together, make a holistic team that can help address every single one of the points that an investor or a judge will be looking for. The second thing, again, as we said, good backing. Sometimes who you select as partners and who you select as investors is just as important as your product, because I'll give you an example. If I'm investing in a sports technology company and I see that, for example, the investors have only really ever invested in toilet paper companies, I'm going to have a lot of questions around, why did you think this was a good investor for you, or a good partner for you? What benefits are they bringing to you as a whole? If it's just capital, that's fine if they're just bringing money, but then that has to be reflected in your business plan, and how you're going to bring on other investors or other partners that are actually going to provide strategic value beyond the capital. So it's important to make those considerations if you're presenting to us in your final presentation who you're looking to partner with or grow with or collaborate with or create a joint venture with in order to get this product off the ground. Really have a strong rationale behind why you're selecting them. If they're experienced in the field, if they're providing financial backing, or if they're actively mentoring. Part of what's really important for your selection process is who sits on your board, and how are they going to provide value to you and the rest of the management team in order to make sure that you're successful as a product or company. We talked about this a little bit, but building a business plan, how to make sure that you're building a sports technology startup or product that will have the moniker of healthy and growing, if you will. So there's a couple of items to consider. I'm not going to dwell too long on these, but commercial modeling. have you thought about how you're going to price your product, how many clients you might have, what are the like the different expenditure types you're going to have, OPEX and CAPEX, and how are your costs going to grow over time? Or are you going to use, for example, AI tools to bring your costs down so you don't overhire personnel and increase your headcount? So understanding how you're going to sell your product and how you're going to finance the rest of your business is extremely important. Pricing strategy comes to play. Like, so are you going to start with a freemium product if it's fan facing? And then, okay, great, it's going to be free, but then how are you going to make money to offset your original costs and create that return on investment? Also understanding what the market opportunity and what the competition looks like. So again, if you've created a new unique product and people like the idea, a lot of the time you will get small competitors rising up behind you. At Hawkeye, we saw a lot of this where there were a lot of smaller companies who said, hey, you know what? We can do exactly what Hawkeye does, but cheaper and with less hardware requirements, for just as an example. But the reality of the situation is that even though they could provide a cheaper product with less install, less hardware requirements, etc., the quality of the tracking that they were producing was nowhere near the quality that Hawkeye was producing. So it's really important to understand when you're developing a commercial model, to understand if it's possible to develop something that's more low cost, ensure that that's considered within your roadmap, because over time there will be players in market who will pop up, who will have a cheaper product than you. And with the way AI and technology is developing, the gap between the quality will be a lot smaller in the future than what it is now. So it's really, really, again, important to understand who's in market, how are they pricing themselves, how are they selling themselves to ensure that you maintain competitiveness. Financial projections. So when you're thinking about investment, and again, this is not necessarily a requirement of this competition explicitly, but it's important to understand that for you to understand if you're going to how many clients you're going to have over time and how you're going to grow your business accordingly, and what does that mean for return on investment. Again, as an investor, we look for all the great qualities of good sports technology product that we spoke about earlier, but it's really important to ensure that from a financial perspective that we see that you've thought of everything and that you understand how your product is going to grow over time, and at the very least have some level of predictions on how sustainable and how scalable the health of your business is going to be. And then an exit strategy. This is not as important, but it is good to think about, okay, if my product gets so big and so successful, what does that mean for us as founders? How are we going to continue the growth? Are we going to IPO? Or are we going to maintain a small company and small growth and keep the value for the existing investors and founders? Now, most people will say, oh yeah, it's our goal to IPO. It's our goal to be so successful that we get on the stock market and we become big enough and we all become billionaires. But I've actually met a lot of founders who don't think that way. And they say, we love our product, we have our market, we want to keep growing our market. We don't necessarily believe in becoming enterprise solutions, for example. We just really love it for the love of the game and for the sport and being able to contribute. So just something to think about in general, not necessarily for the competition. So we get to the last piece here, how to pitch an investment idea. There's obviously in this workshop, we've alluded to a lot of these pieces, but just to really distill it down for you, when you're thinking of how to pitch your investment idea, and this is generalist advice for how you present your final presentation for the competition, it's important to consider your audience, know what your vision for your product is, have again a roadmap Make sure your product is unique and scalable, as we've already discussed. Have detail prepared in your presentation. So your presentation itself doesn't necessarily have to have every answer to every question, but at the very least have an appendix or be able to answer any questions that might come to you based on your presentations. And then from just a look and feel perspective, make sure that when you're showcasing your product, that your presentation skills are very quick, clear, and concise, so that you don't lose the attention of who you're pitching to. So speaking of who you're pitching to from an audience perspective, it's really, again, important to understand who your judges are or who your investors are, understand their background, understand their interests, what they're looking for, and really just try to cater your pitch according to who you're speaking to. If you're speaking to a client if your product is sports agnostic, for example, and you're speaking to a tennis client, you're not going to pitch your product to a tennis client the same way you're going to pitch it to a football client, because they have different needs, different parameters for their sport that need to be addressed. The second piece is, what is their existing stack? If you're selling to a client, then it's really important to understand what they're actually interested in. If they already have ideas around other sports technology companies, and you're going to be complementing that value chain, then understanding who those other technology companies are is really important. Or if they're, for example, a rights holder for let's use the Saudi Pro League as an illustrative example, understanding who they use to fulfill their fan engagement needs or their broadcasting needs or their performance needs. Understanding who they're using currently is important, because if you can either integrate with that existing system so they don't have to, again, go through the issue of procurement, resourcing, again, thinking like you are the person on the other side of the pitch from you is extremely important. So understanding what their issues are, what their needs are, what do they have in-house already, and how you can either complement that or overtake that. It's a valid assumption to say, hey, I know you have all of these in your tech stack currently. We can actually do 3/4 of what 8 providers you have already do for you, and then the rest of them we can integrate with. That's a compelling argument for someone who's trying to minimize the number of stakeholders they have when it comes to their sport or the product. And then the last thing is, what value will you actually bring to them? So it's important that when you're speaking to your audience, you clearly articulate the value of your product, that unique selling proposition, what makes your product stand out, and be very, very clear on how your product will help them achieve their goals in that sense. Moving on, vision. Vision is very important. I hadn't mentioned this previously, but when you're pitching to someone and you have a very clear vision, that is kind of the subtext that they will have the entire presentation through. So if you're not repeating your vision or helping them understand how your product contributes to your vision and why that vision is valuable and how your product can help elevate that vision, you're probably going to lose the narrative when it comes to pitching your product. So it's really important that you have a very clear vision. An ambitious but achievable vision is extremely important. And a vision that is relatable, right? So when we say relatable, not just relatable to the judges or the investors, but especially it has to be relatable to the clients, but also has to be relatable in industry. So I'll give you an example. A few years, there was a major blockchain and NFT bubble. And for a whole year, the industry spoke of nothing other than blockchain and NFTs. And then that bubble burst. And now it's a very contentious industry where people are saying the bubble hasn't burst. No, there's still opportunity, but fans need to be educated on what NFTs mean and how to tokenize and how to operate on the blockchain, and etc., which requires a lot of changes in fan behavior. And some people are still actively pursuing that, which is good because there is an audience for it, but it's not as massive an engagement as people thought it was during that year. There's different trends every year. So it's really about ensuring, one, again, back to the future-proofing point, that you're able to move with the trends and that you're flexible enough and that your vision transcends those trends, which is extremely important. So making sure that your vision, again, is clear and future-proofed and ambitious is extremely important. Your roadmap, again, I won't reiterate too much on this point. However, your roadmap, you have to ensure that you are very clear on what the major milestones are. They can be revenue milestones, they can be innovation milestones, feature set milestones. It doesn't matter so long as you're explicitly clear on what they are. And then to that end, when you plan on executing on the timeline to get to those milestones. So if I'm told a feature will take over a year to develop, my question is why? What are your tools? What are your resources? How many developers do you have on this? Are you QAing it every week? Penetration testing is usually done once every 6 months to a year. Does it need more than that? What does the execution timeline for your major milestones look like? And why do you need the amount of time to execute on those milestones? And then the last point, again, to reiterate, a very clear growth plan. So if you have major milestones, whether that's in this year, next year, over 10 years, as long as that's very clear and correlates with your growth plan from a client perspective, product development perspective, financial perspective, that's the most important thing. If things across those three categories aren't matched, or don't tell a seamless story of growth, then you're going to get a lot of questions from the judges and investors as to why that's the case. Why doesn't your product roadmap match your financial growth? Moving on from that, the last thing I'll harp on before I open to any questions is detail. So it's extremely important that you, as the creator of this product or the team managing this business or whatever setup you're in, knowing every answer to every question is extremely important. So things like justifying why you think your financial projections are going to grow a certain way, or being able to answer questions on your future roadmap and why you've chosen that milestone for that specific timeline in order to achieve what goals. Being very detail oriented on how you're going to be addressing different client issues, but also trends and requirements over time. All of these are things you need to be able to answer. If you can't answer individually, the team as a whole needs to be able to answer it. And it's okay if you don't have all the answers, so long as the people on your team can pick up on those answers and be able to support you in delivering that messaging. Things like security testing is extremely important nowadays, especially we're talking about AI tools and different cloud hosting mechanisms and hackers off of the black market and various other things. Security is extremely important. So being able to answer questions related to how you're going to ensure your product remains secure against threats and ensuring that your cybersecurity provisions are up to date, extremely important, and being able to answer that within the scope of your presentations will be helpful to you. Market differentiation, we've already spoken about this, but again, really just being able to answer the questions. If we ask you, who are your main competitors in market, and you say nobody, we won't believe you, right? There's a saying that goes, if you have an innovative idea, it's likely that someone in the past has thought of it. And that's usually the case in the world of sports technology. So again, be very mindful of who your competition is and how you're unique. Detail on your scaling strategy. So if you're starting again with, and this is all very, very high level, but if you're starting with one feature set, how are you going to scale that feature set? How are you going to be able to expand it? Or how are you going to be able to take your product from a single sport to multiple sports, or from a single ecosystem to multiple ecosystems? And if you do that, how are you going to interconnect them, etc.? So again, being able to answer questions on how you're going to scale is going to be extremely important for you. Again, I'm being very ambiguous because there's a lot of different products that across the board that you guys are trying to develop. So this is as generalist as it can be to ensure that you guys are given as many tips and tricks as possible to be successful regardless of what you're working on. Detail on customer acquisition. How are you going to get clients? We spoke earlier about proof of concepts and case studies and partnerships. Those are all very important, but how are you, if you start free, then how are you going to start developing paying clients? How are you going to engage more clients? What's your strategy there? What channels are you going to use in order to attract these clients? And have considerations. That's why sometimes your most powerful person in a sports tech company is your marketing person from an external perspective. One other point is your profitability plan. How are you going to make money? How are you going to give the investors a return on their investment? It's really, really important to understand your path to profitability. It's not just about making money and revenue, but it's about being profitable and being able to use revenues to feed back into your business to help grow your business, and then make money such that you can build a good reputation in market, but also be able to focus on what you need to do, which is innovating. So if you have a good profitability plan, then your roadmap plan should work in tandem with that as well. And then last is retention strategy. The worst thing in the world to happen to a technology company is to sign on amazing clients and then within a year lose those clients. Client retention is probably one of the most important success factors for any technology. If you've been with a rights holder, for example, like the Olympic Committee for 10 years, and you're continuing to innovate and they're not willing to let you go, that is the best success story that you could have ever. And that's going to help with customer acquisition because, again, case studies and being able to say that you've successfully grown and serviced key clients and key stakeholders in industry is one of the most powerful lines you can have in any presentation. Now, obviously, in the case of this competition, you're not going to necessarily have a retention strategy for clients that don't exist in your portfolio now. However, it's important to understand or at least plan for a retention strategy. So if you have 5 clients, how do you plan on maintaining those clients? Will it mean bundling discounts for pricing? Will it mean giving them opportunities to help you build bespoke feature sets, things like that? So again, how are you going to keep your clients engaged with your product over time as you grow, but also as trends change and also as their needs develop and change as well with the audience that they're trying to address? So I think that's it for now. If anybody has any questions, obviously, as regards to the competition, you can always reach out on Discord. And if there's anything you guys need from myself as a mentor or anybody at Surge, we're more than happy to help. We look forward to seeing your presentations when it comes to judging in a month or so. And best of luck. Take care, everybody.